how to switch strings smoothly and clearly. If we haven't met, hi, I'm Megan. I'm a violinist and teacher. I've been playing the violin for over 20 years. I have my bachelor's and master's degrees in violin performance, and I am Suzuki trained. If you're enjoying my videos, please just double check and make sure that you're subscribed to my channel. It really helps me out. And if you're looking for more support and guidance along your violin journey, you can check the description for a link for a private lesson application with me where you can work with me one-on-one, and my self-paced online comprehensive learning program, Learn Violin Online. So switching between strings or string crossing can be really challenging on the violin. And I know we've all been guilty of hearing noisy neighbors, which is what I call like hitting other strings when you didn't mean to, and even some very unsettling squeaks now and then. So in this video, you'll learn how to actually cross strings and the reason why you might be hearing noisy neighbors or those squeaks when you're crossing strings. So the first thing is to make sure that you are performing your string crossings correctly. When you are going from a higher string to a lower string, so for example, if you're going from E string over to A string, your wrist is going to lead the movement. Now, this is not to say your elbow is not going to move, because it should slightly raise, but your wrist goes first and your elbow follows. So this is how I look when I'm playing on the E string. You can see that my arm is very low. It's almost touching my side. And then when I string cross over to A, I'm going to bring my hand up and then allow my elbow and the rest of my arm to follow. Important thing to note, even as I go from A to D or D down to G, my shoulder does not raise. Now, when you're going from a lower string to a higher string, it's the opposite. So your elbow or your arm, your forearm, that's another way of thinking about it, moves first, and then your wrist moves second. So if I started on G string, this is what my arm would look like. Just take a quick note of where my elbow is in relation to my wrist. You can see that my elbow is slightly below my wrist. This should be the case in about 90% of your violin playing. Now when I move from G string down to D string, my arm just falls. So my elbow goes first, and then my hand follows. If you think about it, you're working with gravity, right? You're going down, so you allow your arm to fall, and then your hand follows. Now that you know how to perform string crossings correctly, let's dive deeper into what causes those noisy neighbors. So if you are intending to play just on one string, so if you are just playing on A string and you are hearing another string, so let's say you're hearing D string or you're hearing E string, one of two things is likely happening, or maybe even both. First possibility is that your elbow may not be in the correct place. So if I'm gonna play on A string, my elbow's gonna be about right there. But if it's too low, it's very easy for me to hit E string, and if it's too high, it's very easy for me to hit D string. So again, here's another look at elbow levels. This is E, A, D, and G. And again, the elbow is always slightly below the wrist, and my upper arm is relaxed. The second thing that could possibly be happening is that your hand is not moving in a straight line. So say I wanted to go down bow. In order for me to only hit the A string, my hand has to move in a completely, I don't know if it's straight is the right word, it's more like a diagonal line, like that. It's not moving up and down. However, if my hand wobbles like that, and it goes down, I'm gonna hear E string, and if it wobbles up, I'm gonna hear D string. So to sum up, if you're hearing noisy neighbors, or if when you're playing on one singular string it is not clear, check your elbow levels and make sure your hand is moving in a straight line, or a diagonal line, whichever is easiest for you to think of. Now, if you're hearing noisy neighbors while crossing strings and or annoying squeaks while crossing strings, there's two different things that might be happening. So the first is that you are moving too much. So say I wanted to do this slur from the D string to the A string. If you think about it, and if you look at it visually, our strings are actually fairly close together. So when I go from D string down to A string, the movement is fairly subtle. It's just a very slight downward falling motion. And if I wanted to go back over to D, same thing. So all in all, now I'm probably moving about that-ish much to get to the next string. If I were to do this and move way too much, way too far down, then I would hit E string. And vice versa. If I were to move too far up, I'm gonna hit G string. And obviously I'm over exaggerating here in these examples, but say you're crossing from A to D and you hear a little bit of G string, you move too much, and vice versa. The other thing that could possibly be happening is that you are not performing the string crossing quickly enough. So if you're hearing squeaks or unclear sounds, this is what's likely happening. The cause of that squeak is because for a brief second, your bow is actually caught between the two strings. So for a split second, your bow is technically playing two strings. You're technically playing a double stop, but it's just not solidly on one or the other, which causes that squeak. I'm honestly not sure if I can even demonstrate it, but it's something like that. Something like that. So you need to move your bow more quickly and solidly to the next string. Another thing to evaluate is the amount of weight that you're putting into the bow. If you're not putting enough weight, you're gonna hear that squeaking sound, but if you're putting too much, you're gonna hear a crunching sound. Finally, when it comes to big string crossings, so say for example, you were playing this from Minuet 2, you are crossing from the E string over to the D string. In this case, you need to make sure that your bow is completely stopped while you're crossing strings. If your bow is still moving, you're gonna hear that A string sound, you might hear a squeak, you're gonna hear the noisy neighbors. So make sure your bow is fully stopped while you're crossing strings. Additionally, while your bow is stopped, do not put any extra pressure into the bow because that's going to cause a crunching or a rubbing sound, kind of like this. So now you know how to switch smoothly between strings. You will know exactly what's causing your noisy neighbors. And if string crossing problems persist, you can try practicing the passage on open strings and practicing putting a brief space or a brief pause before you string cross to give yourself extra time to get there. If this was helpful, please like the video and make sure you're subscribed. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.